Welcome to the We Hack Purple podcast. Join us for episode 2 with guest Mario Platt. This week, with our host Tanya Janca, we are going to learn what it's like to be a director of strategy. Thank you so much to our sponsor, Medic. Hi, welcome.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming onto the We Hack Purple podcast. I'm so excited to have you, Mario.
Thank you.
So the We Hack Purple podcast is, the first season is about finding your career in information security. So we want to talk about different types of jobs, and you have had every type of job. And so it's going to be so good. So let's start off with, please tell us your name and your handle so that people could follow you online maybe.
Yep. So my name is Mario Platt. In terms of social networks, I mainly do Twitter. So my handle is MAD Platt, Matt Platt.
Nice.
Yeah.
What is your job title?
So right now, my job title is Director of Strategy for Practical Devsecops. And I do a lot of work around strategy. I do a lot of talks and try and create as much content as I can on the topic of security strategy.
That's totally awesome. Your job sounds pretty fun.
It is.
So I know that you just described your job, but you have done many jobs. Is there a chance we could go a little bit off script and then you could tell me like the types, like a bunch of different jobs you had and kind of like what they are, because people who are watching might never have heard of some of these jobs that we were talking about earlier?
Yep, sure. So probably the simplest way is to make a journey through my career would probably be the best way to go about it. So I got interested in hacking in the late 90s, and my first full-time security job was in the early 2000s as a penetration tester. So it was kind of a mixed role because even though mostly what I did was penetration testing, I also I worked directly with a marketing company. So I not only had the chance to do penetration testing for some of our corporate customers, so that included everything from helping the sales opportunity. So would go with the marketing team and supporting them on trying to understand what their needs were, what they were trying to secure. And then also doing the technical parts of the assessment. So in those early days, that was around the time where Google hacking was starting to become a thing. I think the book is still out there from those days. So there was a lot of the typical vulnerability assessments, trying to identify things on a lot of Google hacking, trying to understand what Google already knew about organizations, then trying to do the more active parts of the assessments against their infrastructure, against the services, and then the writing of reports, right, which was usually the more the less fun thing, right?
The super exciting part.
No, no, there was most definitely not. And then it still had the layers of management review before being delivered to the customer, right? Some things had to be said in a different
ways. Did you have to I've heard some people say that they have to present their reports with a formal PowerPoint presentation and present it to management, and the management is always like, "Oh, I thought we were perfect." Is that true?
Yeah, it was part of what I did most of the time, particularly when, so we would always share the reports in advance, and then usually the account managers, because this was the biggest telco in Portugal, because they had a proper account management, etc. They always wanted to sit down with the customer, mainly to identify other opportunities to upsell. There was the commercial driver behind it. So we would then talk about some of their findings and other services that we could provide to them to try and mitigate some of those. But there was usually not necessarily a PowerPoint presentation, but a walkthrough, the kind of the executive summary of the reports. And I would typically find myself with not only with management on the side of the client, but also their technical staff, which were then spent at least half an hour to an hour trying to say that the vulnerabilities I had found were not vulnerabilities, and me trying to convince them that they were. So those were very fun days.
I'm laughing because I have also had to do what Mario has done. Yeah. Yep. And I'm laughing because I'm like, that's so true.
Yeah, it's what usually happens, right? People will try and justify, particularly from a technical point of view, they see it as features, not bugs, many times, right? And we didn't try to explain to them what the security implications are or could be.
Hmm. So, what is tell us about some of, because you have had many, many different
Yep.
jobs.
Another part of my role at that particular team was also product testing. So because I was a part of the marketing team, and there were a team of 4 people that did security product management.
Oh, wow.
So what happened is I first started by doing, basically I played with toys, right? Everything they wanted to add to the commercial portfolio to sell as either managed services or as appliances, etc. I would do all of the testing between different comparisons. I would compare products, etc., and then sell them. So at the time, this was early 2000s. The main thing was IPS. There was the new thing coming on the market. So for one of the projects that I had for about 6 months was to trial lots of different vendors from IPS for us to then select one to add to our portfolio, to add to the managed services, etc. So it was really good fun.
Was that interesting? Like, did you find that fascinating to be able to compare all the different services, or was it dull, or?
No, it was brilliant. So particularly at that age, people that are more technically inclined, that really like to mess with the technology, because it gave me a chance to do everything. Right, I didn't have to worry about a production environment, so I could just reboot things in the middle of the day and do whatever I wanted with it. I could attack it at will, so I would usually put some web servers behind it. It was really like playing games from it was probably the most fun job I had. It was just playing, right? And then trying to put that into something coherent for people to read as a report of, I think this is a better technical solution than the other one. But that was a really, really interesting job, particularly me, that I really like the technical parts of it. That was probably the most enjoyable role that I had, because in that particular scenario, there are no preoccupations about keeping the system up, right? There's
Yes.
no concerns about production. You can do whatever you want, and you're just testing stuff, and it's just fun all day. There's no downtime. There's no someone changed the firewall rule and our whole platform is down, right? That doesn't exist.
And
So
when
it
you
was a
do
really
pen
good job.
testing, you do have to do that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Very careful.
Yep.
So, not that pen testing isn't still fun. Still,
Yep.
it's
So
fun.
one of the most interesting ones I had was at 6 a.m. in the morning, having calling a customer a bank because their servers were down because they had an SSL vulnerability on their IIS that broke the SSL service, and I had to call the guy that was on call 3 times and escalate to his manager at 7 a.m. because he was arguing with me that his servers were down, and I was telling them they weren't. And I had to call his manager because at 8 a.m. I knew there were services running that it was going to go horribly wrong. So I had to go over him and call his manager. Look, he's not believing me, and he does need to restart the services
Oh, yeah.
because otherwise it's going to be difficult for everyone.
So, so right now you're the director of strategy
Yeah,
of where?
practical Devsecops.
So, for people that don't know about Practical DevSecOps, my friend Imran
Yep.
Mohammed founded that company.
Yes.
And I know that they're technically our direct competitor, but Mohammed's my friend. Imran's my friend. I don't care. They're awesome.
Yep.
So, what is a typical day in the life for Mario being the director of strategy? Like, what would a day be like? What do you do?
So there are different parts to the role. So one of them is that also goes back to the ethos of practical DevSecOps. So we are very much believers in open source. We're believers in democratizing access to information, right? And that was also part of the reason why Imran and myself, we get along really well with each other, and we found that the way we're trying to approach security, him more on the technical side of things, and me these days more on the strategy and program management, etc., that we had the same ethos, which is, look, we don't have anything that we're trying to hide, right? We're just trying to expand knowledge, and we know that if we do a good job at talking to the people about this subject, that business will come to us, right? We just want to do the best we can for our communities, and we know that business takes care of itself when you're doing good things for other people. And that was the type of ethos that brought us together. So on that, a lot of the work that I do, I can really combine a lot of good things that I really like to do. So one of them is the research side of it. So trying to understand where the market is going, how our competition is offering, the type of content that we have on our courses. So one of the things that I've been working on, and it's going to be released in the next 3 weeks, is a new course that we're delivering, which is a CDL, Certified Devsecops Leader. Because, for instance, one of the things missing on the market, not just on DevSecOps, but also on DevOps, is that there's a lot of technical information out there, but not really much information on how you manage a function.
That's such a good point.
That doesn't exist.
I agree so
and that
much.
was something that as part of the role that I do, that I've identified that is something that doesn't exist on the market. So let's create a product for it. And I try to distill a lot of the things that I do, that we do with consulting, with our consulting engagements, on trying to advise on strategy, try to define a security program, trying to help them understand what risks they have, what are the things that are mostly affecting their particular industries or their particular organization, in trying to come up with help them define their own security strategies. In that, usually what I do a lot, what I like to do is combine these two things. So on one hand, I've got time to do the research. On the other hand, I can then build up the knowledge that I can advise the business side of it, that I can then advise our consulting customers on how they can improve their current situation. So there's a bit of both. The part on helping people with the problems that they have, not just the problems, right? A big part of the problem in strategy, and this is overall strategy, not just security specifically, is that people do too much what I like to call reports, and not really understanding what are their internal capabilities, what do their people know how to do, how we can leverage what already exists before we start with major transformation programs that are going to cost a lot of money, potentially not be effective because the organizations aren't ready to absorb them, right? So that type of more situational awareness and helping with that's really the type of thing that I love to do, and I get the opportunity to do it.
Cool. So as you might have guessed, I have more questions because I want to know everything. So what types of personality traits do you think someone needs to be good at your job?
So I think there are two aspects of it, and that's why it's a slightly different type of role, I would say. Because on one hand, you really, in my opinion, you really need to be a bit of a nerd, right? So I'm most happy if you leave me with a book for 5 hours and I don't have my kids around. I'm going to be reading, right? Either that or watching Star Trek. One of the two things are going to be happening, right? So really having the appetite for knowledge, right? So that you can be alone with a book or with the content, and you're going to dig into it, and you're not doing it because you've got a deadline. You're doing it because that's what you would be doing anyway, right? Yeah. You'd be geeking out on some kind of subject that you decided to do, right? So there, on one hand, there's that aspect, right? That you need to be comfortable with sitting with yourself with the subject and just studying it because you're curious, right? It's curiosity. For me, it's always been about curiosity. I just I want to know everything. Right? It's not going to happen, but that's just I always find interesting new things that I want to learn about. So there's that part of the being curious and be wanting to do something about it, right? Which is key.
Yeah.
On the other aspect of it is that just researching the subjects is not enough. You need to be able to communicate them, right? And that was also part of the reason why I'm on my last module to finish my business degree. So I don't have a degree in tech or computer science or anything like that. My degree is in business because I started my degree already with 12, 13 years of security experience, right? So I didn't do the usual route. I started working when I was 17 in IT. Because of that, I believe that helps me frame the problems in business terms, because I had to for my business degree, I had to understand finance, I had to understand business operations, I had to understand marketing, I had to understand HR. So I had to do all those subjects and do projects around them. Right. So the ability to then communicate to back to business what the outcomes of that research that you've done mean to them, or what it can mean. That's what I think makes or breaks your effectiveness at being a director of strategy. Right? It's understanding not only having the ability to do the situational awareness. So that means talking internally in organizations with people so that you understand what the current situation, what they're good at, what they're not as good at, what is it possible, what they perceive as possible, as plausible, or something that is completely out of their ability to foresee. So giving you an example, it makes no sense going into to help a company that doesn't have any type of tests on their CI/CD systems, right? And go talk to them about chaos engineering, right? It doesn't make sense, right? Their vision of what is possible, of what is plausible in their reality doesn't have that. Yes. So if I go in there and say, look, Netflix does all these great stuff, that's meaningless to them. It's not part of their mental model that they can absorb that information. So if I just go in there and say, you should be thinking about chaos engineering, I'm not helping them. I'm just looking smart, right? And that's not helping anyone. So trying to understand really where people are and etc. I think that's the key part on how we can help others move forward.
Have you also found that you also have to kind of tell them to stop sometimes? So for instance, like one of my clients once, they had me come to a meeting that they had booked with a bug bounty company. And I was explaining to them, you don't even have a basic AppSec program. Yep. You don't even have any software developers that are available to fix any of these bugs or triage any of this. And your release cycle is 16 months. What are you going to do with a bug bounty program? Like, are you kidding? But I had to say it in a really nice way. And I'm like, this is like a PhD, but we're trying to learn kindergarten here. But that sounds condescending. So like, how do you explain things like that? Like, so I guess that leads to my next question is that what kinds of aptitudes do you need? Like, do you need attention to detail, hyper-focus? Do you need to perhaps be able to be empathetic?
Yep. I think that bit is key. In particularly in the type of role that I do, I think that becomes even more important because as I think you will agree with me, but tell me if you don't, is that a lot of people in InfoSec don't really understand technology, right? And that's not a problem in and of itself, right? There are lots of different roles where you don't need to be technical. That's not necessarily a problem, right? But the challenge is if you, for instance, let's say that I'm a non-technical person that only does compliance, right? ISO 27001, for instance, and I've got no understanding of what an application looks like. I have no idea what infrastructure looks like. I don't have any type of technical knowledge. So when I go and speak with someone that is on the technical team, the best I can do is tell you about what the standard says and hope that you can convince me with your answer, right? If I don't have the understanding of how things work at the technical level, I can't help you fix your problem. I can only tell you what I need to see, and then you try and fix. And hopefully you can try to convince me that you're doing something about it. But that leaves you in a non-ideal situation, right? Because building the trust with the person that is in front of you, that you understand the operational constraints that you exist in, that you understand the technical architecture, and that when you provide the recommendation, that you do it from a place of understanding what the problem is and what it will do to their operation, right, to their production environment, puts you in a position to be trusted. That helps you, again, and if you're trying to be empathetic, that helps build the type of trust where people will actually tell you the truth, right? They're not going to tell you what the book says and what you want to hear. They're going to tell you this is how it works, and then you can make your own judgments. And that's a type of thing that builds over time, right? So even that's why I usually say, even if you come from an untechnical background, it's still, look, go spend $15 on a Udemy course on Docker or something like that, right? Go and do a bit of an effort to at least understand what people are talking about, right? Yeah. And when technical people see that you are making an effort to understand what their day-to-day looks like, what the technology looks like, then at least you've got the vocabulary to understand the answers, right? And that's the main thing, is having a shared vocabulary that a lot of people in InfoSec don't have with our engineering teams.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. I totally agree. So since you brought it up, what types of technical skills do people need to have in order to become a director of strategy? Like, do you need to know how to code? Do you need to know how to write exploits?
So I think it depends. So from my point of view, so I'm not the one type of role that I've never had is a direct AppSec, right? I'm not a developer, so my background is infrastructure. So I spent a lot of time in telcos with network infrastructure, building my own servers, building my own kind of core Cisco routers, core firewalls, that type of stuff at the ISP level. So really big stuff. So that is more of my background. When the world changed more from appliance-based stuff more to DevOps type thing, luckily I already had at least 12 years of engineering, of messing with Linux boxes, of managing my own radius servers, that type of stuff that I could leverage, right, in order to understand what the new world looks like and how to do security engineering in a DevOps world, right? But I would say that, depending on the needs of the organization and depending on the types of stakeholders that you deal with, having a basic understanding of the infrastructure side of things really helps, particularly in a DevOps world, right? Because one of the things that we talk about on the course that I'm now building is that from a security perspective, a CI/CD system in the version control system, so a GitLab or a GitHub or a Jenkins, etc., they are systems of record, right? You can go look into them if you don't have a big issue with, let's say, backdoors where people are making changes directly on the assets. That's your version of truth. Things today are version controlled. If you know how to navigate, how to open a GitLab or a Jenkins, and you can understand, look, I'm going to look at the last 10 commits and try to understand what it is, then you're halfway through actually being able to have a meaningful conversation, because you're going to be able to read the comment someone left on the comment. On the code review, right? You have the ability to, even if you can't read the code, which ideally, if you can, that would be good, right? But if you can't, at least you know how to navigate the system of record, right? And I think that is probably what I'd call the minimum viable knowledge, right? To really understand what is going on. And then it depends on each company, right? So if you're a Terraform house, maybe, again, even if it's a $15 Udemy course and you spend 4 or 5 hours just going through the course, even if you can't write the code yourself, at least you'll be able to understand what it looks like and be able to read a snippet of code and understand what's going on. And I think having the ability, that ability just to understand what's going on around you is the kind of the minimum viable knowledge, right? I don't think you necessarily need to be a full-fledged developer and know how to develop exploits. For some companies, that may be. I know CISOs that can do that, right? And it's good for them. But that's not really the type of thing that I do. So, giving you an example, when I go into organizations and help them with stuff, so some of the things that I've talked with Devsecops, etc., is compliance as code. It's something that I talk a lot about.
Tell them what Devsecops is.
Oops. So one of the things that I do is I usually try and help companies to start the journey of going down compliance as code, right? But the really complex stuff, I can't do it. It's not within my skill set. I'm not a developer, right? But I can show them and I can help them. Look, let's implement a basic baseline. Let me help you develop scripts to check your cookies or to check your that type of basic stuff. Yeah. And because that's what companies need help with mostly, is the introduction of the practice, right? Yes. Because after you introduce the practice, look, there are people at the customer who I'm working with, there will be I've had a lighting problem here. Okay. There are people over there that know how to code much better than me. I'm not going to try and do their job, right? What they need my help with is to start to introduce the practice, right? That's what I'm there to do.
Yeah.
And if I just focus on the minimum stuff that I can help them with, then it's going to make me effective. They're going to get the benefit, and I don't need to be a super duper developer, and I don't need any of that, right? I need to help the organization embed practices, start developing the practices, knowing that the company, if they're developing products and services, they themselves have the ability to take it from there, right? I just need really to help them with that initial part.
I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor. So our sponsor this week is Hermetic Security. They are from Israel, and they do policy automation and specifically least privilege automation in the cloud. And what that means is basically we often give way too many privileges on so many things. We have trouble actually applying all of our policies. And so their system goes into AWS and then makes all of that happen. And I've seen it, and it's pretty cool. I have many more questions for you. So let's say that I am a person and I just graduated university. I am so excited to start my career. And can I just become a director of strategy right away? Or if not, which I think the answer is no, you can't walk into a director role. What types of work experience would I need? So like, let's say I want to aim for that in my career. Like, what types of jobs would I need to get there?
So that's always been, again, I think I probably had it easier because I always thought about the concept of leveraging. And that's what I would always say to everyone starting in a career in security, which is, if you're starting, appreciate that it's going to be, if you really want to do this, you're probably gonna be here for a long time, right? So careers usually these days, you're gonna get to a point where you've been at this 10, 20, 30, 40 years, right? That's usually how it goes.
Hopefully.
So the idea that unfortunately I see a lot of people, even people that I worked with 15 years ago, they still have the same type of they do the same type of thing that they did 15 years ago, but that was never me, right? I get bored more than anything, and I think there's real benefit in forcing yourself to do different types of roles, right? And the idea of leveraging what you already know to do something that you could do, I think, is the key thing to do. I would always suggest before going into any type of governance role. So I mean, what I mean by that is more kind of security governance, risk management, compliance, to spend at least 5 to 10 years on more technical roles, whether that is on a SOC or security operations or any of those roles that give you more hands-on experience, because that is going to pay dividends further down the line. Because a lot of people that don't have that type of background or didn't go early in their career to a more technical role, then they feel later on that they're missing those skills and they're missing the vocabulary again to have meaningful conversations with the technical teams, right? And even with the advent of DevOps, let's say. Back in the day, in the early 2000s, when I did security, when I started doing security engineering, we were already managing Linux boxes. We already had CLIs. We already had all of that. The rules of gravity haven't changed. We just have different ways of doing things, right? We dealt with SQL injection problems back then. We're still dealing with them now, right? So the laws of gravity haven't changed, right?
Well, I'm sad that one didn't change.
Yeah, but even there, and that kind of goes on with that's actually a good point, etc. With regards to the evolution of things. So, for instance, if you had a code base on PHP 10, 15 years ago, and you now have mostly a code base with React, you know that just because you're using a better framework, cross-site scripting is no longer a problem, right? So just by changing the framework, there's a whole class of vulnerabilities that you now don't have to worry with. So even if you come from a development background, that is probably something else. So trying to understand what are the new types of frameworks that are coming that do things more securely, and trying to focus on them early on while the rest of the market still hasn't catch up. That will make you preferable, that will make your skills particularly unique in the marketplace, so that the customers that you want to work with will find you, right? And that is also a big part of the reason why I use worthy mapping, right? So one of the maps that I've created was a map of skills in
Can
security.
you share a link to that at the end?
Yes, I can.
Who are listening to the live stream?
Yep. So I wrote a blog post on that. So, but the basic idea is that everything evolves from being Genesis to being a commodity, right? So, for instance, what I call commoditized security skills these days are things more like traditional compliance, so spreadsheet-based testing, that type of traditional SDLC. Those are things that are skills that are commoditized. Right? So everyone in security can do them. So if that's all that you're bringing to the table to an organization these days, you have a strategic disadvantage, right? Because you may be keeping the lights on, but that's not what the market is asking for. But the market is now asking for the types of things. They're asking for you to understand Agile. They're asking for you to understand what version control systems are. It's asking for Devsecops, for those kinds of threat modeling. Those are the things that if you go to most job descriptions these days, they are asking for those things. But so those are the things that the market is now asking for, right? So they're worth good money, right? It's also, you know, that you if you focus on those, you are building a skill that you know that the market needs now. But that's not where it ends, because we also have the things that are in the genesis phase, things that are still ramping up on their adoption, and that most employers still haven't realized that it's their own future. There are things that they're going to need next, right? So it's if you're using a soccer analogy, it's not if you're focusing on what the market wants now, you're passing the ball directly to where someone is. But if you're thinking a bit further ahead, you're passing the ball to where you know the person will be, right? So you're not passing it to where he is, you're passing it to where he's going to be, right? And I think that's a good analogy. So things such as compliance as code, resilience engineering, threat modeling as code, those are all practices that are still on the emergent phase, right? They still aren't widely adopted. Most companies aren't asking for it, but and again, that's the type of work that I do.
That wants to do threat modeling as code, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes.
And that's also the type of thing that so the people that usually follow me on social media, etc., they follow me because I talk about these things, because I've made that map. I have an idea of where I see the industry going, and personally I only blog about things that are in the genesis phase, that are still emerging, for two reasons. The first one is the customers that I want to work with, they find me right now. And I only work for the organizations that are looking for the types of things that I want to talk about. In 5 years, the rest of the industry catches up, I'm going to have 5 years of content already written on the subject, right? So it's strategic, not only from a business point of view, but also from a personal career perspective. When the market catches up on some of these things that aren't yet widely adopted, I'm going to be one of the people they're going to find that it's been talking about it for a while.
I like it. Wait. Obviously, I have to ask, will you share a link to your blog so that we can put it in the show notes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
so
I just want people listening to
securitydifferently.com.
know it's going to be there. Don't worry. We're not holding out on you. You can have the blog.
Yes. securitydifferently.com. Very simple.
I love it. I love the name of your blog. That's awesome. Okay, so now I have a sensitive question. Does your job pay well in your opinion? Does being the director of strategy at a startup pay well?
So there are two. So any startup doesn't pay well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Telling the truth. Right? Yes, telling the truth. Thank you.
Speaking truth, right?
I'm the CEO. So it doesn't pay well.
It's an investment in the future, right? But that's where So I have this partnership with Practical Devsecops, and I'm also a consultant. So I do work through Practical Devsecops and also in my individual name, right? And I think that's also where when you are building your career, you need to think. I like to think hard about what I'm doing, right? And that means that for a while, you're going to have to build a name for yourself, right? You're going to have to acquire the skills and do the grunt work, right? It's part of building a career, right? There's no escaping it if that's what you want to do. So having approaching the way that I did, which more focus on the experience and a bit less on the money. The money comes eventually, right? So between my consulting and the role in Practical Devsecops, etc., then that leaves me in the position where I can, where you can kind of name your price, right? In terms of the type of things that you do. If you're doing something that is not what the market has widely available, again, if you're bringing not necessarily unique skills, but if you're bringing unique perspectives or things that aren't what everyone else is saying, right? So I'm not if I'm doing a consulting gig, I'm not grabbing a Gartner quadrant, a 2x2, and saying you should get that one, right? There's no value in that. That's a commodity. Anyone can do that, right? If you focus on building the skill set, that you're bringing unique perspectives into the organizations that you work with, the problem sorts itself out. Right. But again, this is not something that you wake up one day and it's there, right? It's something that you work with over time. So I've been working in security. My first full-time security role was in 2003, right? So I've been at this, and I had some 3 years working in IT prior to that, so more system administration and that type of stuff. So I have over 20 years in the, only for the last 3 have I been able to be in this position, right? So it's not something that it's something that takes effort over time.
It's not. You're not going to roll into it right after you finish school.
No. Or if you do, you're putting yourself in a situation where you're gonna suffer more with imposter syndrome. We all do, right? But if you put yourself in that situation, it's even worse, right? Because you may put yourself in situations talking with stakeholders that really know their thing, and people will test you, right? Your peers will test you, your managers will test you, your peers around the organizations will test you, right? That's what happens, right? People power dynamics are a real thing in organizations. So if you haven't built that muscle memory and that type of skill set that you can handle yourself in those type of situations, and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn from them, and that's how this works, right?
Absolutely. So let's say someone has listened to this podcast episode and they think, you know what, one day I want to be a director of strategy. Could you give us one actionable step that they could try to do towards working in a startup towards eventually becoming someone who could apply for a job called director of strategy? Right. Yep. I have 2 friends that have this title, and I have to say they're both badass and awesome. And so, besides being badass and awesome, what actionable, because there's no actionable step, be awesome, right? Yeah. So what would the actionable step be towards that?
So the main thing is to truly understand business, and that may mean doing a business degree, as I did, because even, and this comes from experience working with lots of heads of InfoSec and CISOs, even those that talk a lot about the business, many don't really understand it, right? They never own their own business. They never had to, they wouldn't know how to balance a balance sheet, right? It's that type of, I think, business acumen that you don't necessarily need a degree, right? You need the knowledge. In 2020, there are many, many different ways to acquire the knowledge, right? You don't necessarily need to go to a traditional university to get that type of thing. But understanding business operations, understanding marketing, so it's acquiring that type of knowledge that when someone uses their own jargon, when you're talking about security or what it means to them, you understand the language, you can reply within the same type of vocabulary, right? I think that's the key thing that makes me effective at my job, is that I can, if I'm talking with a manufacturing manager, I understand the words he's using. I understand what his KPIs mean. When he shows me his reports, I can understand. If I look at the financial report, I understand what everything means, right? I'm not seeing anything that I've never seen for the first time. And I think that's the key part, is that when you can frame what it is that you are talking to in the language and the vocabulary of the stakeholder that you're trying to influence, right? That's the key.
I love that insight. And literally, as you were saying it, I was like, I should take business courses. I like this. Maybe I'll get a book. I wonder if I could get an audio book. And I'm like, listen to what he's saying, Tanya. This is the point where I ask all of the people listening, please subscribe. Please subscribe to our podcast. If you are subscribed to our podcast, please write a review. And hopefully the review says, yay, it's awesome. If you are currently watching us live, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And now I have more questions for you.
Okay.
I have 2 more questions, and they're super hard. So the first one is, do you do other things outside of security and outside of your 9-to-5 job that you want to share?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Nice.
It's the thing. Yeah. So martial arts, I've been, I really love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm just a blue belt. So I've been doing it for about 3-ish years.
I'm a new belt. You're doing great.
But it's really the thing that I think these days keeps me grounded. So having that, well, COVID, we are still doing training, no contact here in the UK, etc. But it's really the thing that lets you live in the moment. So nothing like another human being trying to choke you for you to kind of be focusing on the moment, right? I love it.
I'm going to use that. There's nothing like another human being trying to choke you to get you to focus.
So no, it's really good. It's more. So I've done other things in the past, like boxing, etc. But it's a bit more violent, and you get more violent people. In jiu-jitsu, you get more people that are there for self-defense, more martial artists, less fighters, right? And it also builds a good type of community, and you meet really nice people, and yeah, it's really good environment. I love it.
Cool. Okay, so now last question, also very difficult. If someone wants to know more about you, where can they find you? Do you have a website, a blog, events, or links you want to share? And they'll all go into the show notes, but please tell us all about them.
So I would say, so my blog, securitydifferently.com. So I've posted, so lately I've been doing a lot of digging into safety engineering and resilience engineering. So I'm starting a series of blog posts about that, which is also content that we'll be adding in a few months to the Certified Devsecops Leader course. So that is one of them. The other part, I would suggest looking at the Open Security Summit, particularly this year's. So I've done about 6 sessions, 2 hours each almost, where I talk about security strategy. I talk about Cynefin framework, which is sense making, dealing with complexity, worldly mapping, which is developing security strategy. So if you want to learn more about all of these things, as I mentioned at the beginning, and the reason why I've decided to work with Practical DevSecOps, our ethos is one of sharing, is one of democratizing access to knowledge. So yeah, I do all of these every year. I do these sessions for Open Security Summit to share what I know, right? Hopefully other people will benefit from it. But there's at least 8 hours of me speaking this year, 8 to 10 hours that you can get for free on YouTube on Open Security Summit channels as well.
Awesome. I will put all of this into the show notes so that because when people find that, they're immediately going to just want to know more and read more stuff from you. So this is excellent. Thank you so much for being on the We Hack Purple podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
I was really happy when you said yes, and also that you're at the beginning. I really want to have Imran on as well from Practical DevSecOps.
Yeah, I think you should.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you again. And with that, I am going to play the outro video, which I don't have music for, but I swear I will soon. Until next time.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the We Hack Purple podcast. This week we had Mario Platt, the Director of Strategy, and we learned all what it was like to do his amazing job. Thank you so much to our special sponsor, Hermetic. And also, please check out our brand new course, Application Security Foundations Level 1, available at wehackpurple.com as of tomorrow. And we are no longer live, and I've stopped recording. Thank you so much for joining us today on the We Hack Purple podcast. This week we had Mario Platt, the Director of Strategy, and we learned all what it was like to do his amazing job. Thank you so much to our special sponsor, Hermetic. And also, please check out our brand new course, Application Security Foundations Level 1, available at wehackpurple.com as of tomorrow.